Part 28. Creation of the World, Binding God Simulator at the Beginning. Author, Yefeng Feng. Chapter 271. While Bai Zi was sighing, there were new movements in the sand. The giant sandworm rotated its body and used brute force to drag a large number of tree people down the quicksand, and the flying rock was also affected. You are feeling in trouble. The front row of trees has suffered heavy losses. 2/3 of them have fallen into the quicksand. If you cannot deal with the worms in time, they will be swallowed bit by bit. The insect wave behind you is getting closer and closer. In desperation, you have to adjust your team's formation and let the army of 5,000 meteorites serve as the starting lineup. Leading the Flying Dapen and the Sword and Shield clan took the lead in crossing the quicksand area, directly attacking the border base not far away, and opening the way for the large army. The Tree People clan and the Sea Emperor clan were left behind. The two teams were forced to disperse after receiving the Oracle, and Holy Spirit King Dragon became the main force in the rear. It swooped down from the air, caught the giant sandworm as it rushed out of the quicksand, pulled it up completely, and bit it with its dragon's mouth. Without the protection of the terrain, the giant sandworm's weak body was easily torn apart by the dragon's claws. Aurora stood on the shoulder of the Tree Man King, summoned the staff, used magic to summon plants from the quicksand, and pushed the worms hiding underground out of the ground. Without the protection of quicksand, these worms were crushed and exploded by the trees one after another. Fortunately, there was no rot in their bodies and they would not cause any harm to the trees. At this time, the insect swarm from all directions had begun to gather in order to prevent being attacked by sneak attacks. The Poseidon family blocked the back row and assisted the Tree People in cleaning up the quicksand area. Bai Zi led the large army and continued to move forward. This decision is the best situation at present. The insect tide is behind them, and the front of the quicksand is still unknown. With all hands on deck, the quicksand area can indeed be cleaned up quickly. But if there is another such obstacle ahead, the army will inevitably be surrounded by front and rear, and will eventually be trapped in front of the city. So Bai Zi let the flying creature go first, which was also the main force in his hands, and he wanted to understand the road ahead first. Of course, he did not give up on the latter two clans either. With Aurora, who leads the intermediate level, and Holy Spirit King Dragon, who leads the primary level, it is only a matter of time before they break through. At that time, the road ahead will be clear, and as long as you walk through the quicksand area, the insect tide will not be able to catch up. However, what frightened Bai Zi was a forest in the corner alone can gather tens of thousands of insect swarm troops. This has been cleaned up by the previous 11 creators. I really don't know how far the original number of creatures in this world has reached. Late night on the first day, after the main armies of the three tribes walked out of the quicksand area, they moved forward, with only a few hundred Zerg blocking the way. The flying creatures marched very fast. After dealing with the creatures blocking the way, they finally arrived at the border base near the early morning. But you find that more and more black spots are gathering in the distance. They should be the Zerg from several surrounding forests, all migrating here. Without any further hesitation, you began to order the army to attack. The border base is very remote. It was originally a biochemical factory used for experiments. However, after it was occupied by aliens, nuclear radiation was leaked and all the creatures living inside mutated. The meteorite army is rampaging, with the Universe Insect Emperor as the vanguard, and the door to the laboratory is burst open. In order to resist your invasion, the aberrant creatures in the border base all set out. Groups of alien rats emerged from the underground tunnels and pounced on your creatures like crazy. The two-headed evil dogs parading in the city also rushed out from the ruins in all directions. They are organized and disciplined, and they cooperate very well. The number of rats is as high as 1,000, and the lowest slave peak collides head-on with the meteor army. The Universal Insect King joins the battle, but is unexpectedly stopped by a Rat King emerging from the ground. Its sharp claws were quite similar to those of the Universal Insect King. As soon as the two creatures met, they started fighting each other. You know you can't afford it, the insect swarm is following closely behind you, and you must quickly clear the front line battlefield. Simply, you order the Sword and Shield clan to go out. The shield-hidden tiger raises its shield to block the front and advances like a copper wall. The Sword Kanghu disperses on the flanks and strangles all the nearby creatures. In order to preserve its strength, Hypergeton has not made any move, but at this moment, a bunch of huge figures suddenly appeared on top of the ruins on its flanks. The tumorous giant apes that lived in the nearby forest sensed the atmosphere of war in the city and climbed in from the city wall to provide support. Hundreds of warrior-level giant apes join the battle. They are different from ordinary two-headed dogs with their own brute strength. They can fully fight against the Sword and Shield clan. At the same time, the king of the race, the Titan giant ape, has reached the intermediate level of leadership, and wiped out dozens of shield tigers with a wave of his hand. Hypogeton was overjoyed, thinking that he finally had a chance to appear, but he didn't expect Sword Shield Doughty to step forward with his sword and start a fight with the Titan giant ape. Don't be discouraged. There will be a chance for you to appear later. Facing Hypogeton, Bai-Ze comforted him little by little. Hypergeton nodded, without much sadness, and continued to move forward behind the large army. What Bai-Ze said is certainly true. This world is a place where the 11 third-level creators failed. If you walk further back, you are very likely to encounter a high-ranking leader, the pinnacle. Even a monarch-level creature. As the ace, Hypergeton must retain his strength. The other party has extremely high intelligence and can mobilize the aberrant creatures in the entire world, so there must be a way to monitor him. Therefore, Bai-Ze cannot let Hypergeton take action here and expose his trump card early. With the addition of Doughty, your second trump card, the battle situation has improved immediately. Relying on the advantage of numbers, the Meteor army broke through the blockade of the rats, and the deformed rats died in a pile. The Rat King was no match for the Universe Insect King, unable to break its hard shell, and his claws were worn and broken. The Universe Insect King seized the opportunity, accumulated power, and made a fatal blow, cutting the Rat King in half from the middle, ending the entire mutant rat army. The Meteor army, with their hands freed, joined the battle with the two-headed dogs and the tumor giant ape. The Meteor insect, which entered the sprint state, blasted all the two-headed dogs at once. Feeling the threat to its life, the tumor giant ape lost control and wanted to escape. But it was stopped by the faster Dapen, and the tornado blocked the retreat, so the Titan giant ape could only fight to the death. He couldn't break the Doughty in its defensive state. The gap between the two was too big. A golden skyline flashed by, and the Titan giant ape's head was separated. The remaining tumor giant apes felt desperate and began to charge like crazy. They desperately pulled down many Dapen from the sky to be buried with them. Unfortunately, their leader was dead, and their resistance was useless. In the end, they were surrounded and wiped out by the Dapen clan. At this point, the dust settled on the border base. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. Creation of the world, binding God simulator at the beginning. Author, Yefeng Feng. Chapter 272. It's 3 in the morning, and you order the army to take a break. After a battle, the meteorite worms lost 1,000, and the sword, shield, and Dapen lost 500. The meteorite worms are already extremely weak due to the extensive use of skills, and need to replenish a lot of food to recharge. After a day, the rest of the creatures also need to eat, so you order them to feed on the corpses of these deformed creatures to replenish the required energy. Yes, marching and fighting require food and grass. But in this round of simulation, Bai-Ze did not choose to carry resources from the mother planet. Because it is different from the last time when he fought against the mechanical planet. Those mechanical creatures are inedible and their whole bodies are made of iron. And the deformed creatures are meat after all. Eating them not only does not need to be backed up. Even, it can make your own creatures advanced. After all, these deformed creatures have extraordinary power in their bodies. Eating their meat can allow the creatures to absorb equivalent energy. On the other side, as more and more Zergs gathered and the Sea Emperor's army was about to collapse, the worms in the quicksand were finally cleared out. The tree people paid a heavy price, and half of them were submerged in the quicksand. The remaining half of the tree people, together with the Sea Emperors who suffered minor casualties, crossed the quicksand, and after landing, they followed the footsteps of the main army. In the process, the worm tide had already arrived here, and the land they passed was barren, and the trees collapsed in rows. They poured into the quicksand and filled the quicksand river with their numbers, building a wide bridge and continuing to chase the rear army along the bridge. After a careful calculation, it was shocking. In less than a day, the original tens of thousands of worm tides had increased to 70,000 or 80,000. The insects living in the surrounding forests were all gathered by an order and began to double-team the central area. At this time, a system message popped up on ByZe's side. Ding. Host, you have an incoming call. ByZe was stunned. Who could call at this time? But after thinking about it, he replied, System, help connect the phone, answer it. Ding. After a sound, the pop-up window changed to another interface. The name of the contact showed that the call was from Tang Ching Cheng. Clicking the answer button, ByZe asked curiously, what's wrong? Calling me suddenly. At this time, it was late at night, and Tang Qingcheng's tone was a little hesitant. Are you still in the Genesis building now? The more ByZe asked, the more strange he felt. He nodded and replied, I'm still in the Genesis building, what's wrong? What? Are you really still in the Genesis building? Challenging that dungeon task, Tang Qingcheng's tone became hurried. I thought you were just spreading false news. I didn't expect it to be true. Hearing this, ByZe knew what she was worried about. It's okay, this copy can't threaten me. Tomorrow is the first battle, and getting off to a good start is the top priority. Hearing ByZe's cheerful tone, Tang Qingcheng rushed to say, I know you may be sure of victory. But even if you win, your creatures will definitely suffer heavy losses. There will be a second stage of the game by then. ByZe on the other end was a little distressed, but he couldn't say it directly. He has a simulator in his hand, which can simulate battles infinitely. He can formulate the most perfect strategy based on intelligence, greatly reducing the casualties of his creatures. So, ByZe is not worried about the problem Tang Qingcheng mentioned at all. Miss Tang, don't worry, I have my own way. This is very important to me. You and Yunya should concentrate on tomorrow's game, ByZe said jokingly. There was no way, Tang Qingcheng was unwilling to persuade anything. She also believed in ByZe, but just said twice with a serious expression. Okay, then you should pay more attention. After that, the phone was hung up. ByZe sighed and didn't think much about it. Anyway, Tang Qingcheng and Xia Yunya were in the competition, so he just had to concentrate on conquering the world in front of him. As the sun rose, your main force had been fully replenished, and the meteor bugs were in full condition, and they could march at full speed. Not only that, a small number of them that ate the distorted creatures immediately broke through the limit and advanced to the initial stage of the general. At the same time, during this period of time, the two tribes that you had left behind finally rushed into the border base and caught up with the main force to join them. There are still about 8,000 left in the joint army, and some of them have broken through to the initial stage of the general. You are confident that you can kill through the entire distorted planet with the strategy of constantly devouring the opponent. But the good times didn't last long. Rather than catching up, the main force came to escape. According to Aurora's report, the insect tide following behind has gathered to 70,000 or 80,000, and the number is still accumulating, and there was a sign of breaking through 100,000. They will soon enter the border base, so you have to leave quickly. The next morning, the sun rises, and the army is replenished. You urgently mobilize the army to leave the border base and move towards the southeast base. After the large army leaves, a dense swarm of insects follows and enters the border base. They kept moving forward, and the remaining three-eyed rats, two-headed dogs, and two more giant ape corpses were swept away by these insects in an instant. The white light lay flat on the ground, and some of the insects in the insect tide evolved. Not only did their size double, but their realm was also improved. The number of them gathered was still increasing. The entire half of the map in the southeast and southwest corners was occupied by these insects. Along the way, the marching coalition did not encounter too many obstacles, only thousands of weak worms, spiders, centipedes, and other creatures blocked the way. But you found that just as you were about to reach Southeast City, your creature's state gradually began to decline. At first, you thought it was caused by them being too tired, so you let them rest on the spot. But after half an hour, a large number of creatures showed symptoms such as fever, vomiting blood, bleeding, and some already injured creatures went into shock on the spot and died. In a blink of an eye, the total number of creatures dropped sharply by 1,000 again, and the most tragic among them was the meteorite insects. How could this happen? Vomiting blood, fever. How could such symptoms suddenly appear? Bai-Ze felt strange when he saw this. At this time, Aurora, who kept coughing and had an abnormal body temperature, appeared below Bai-Ze. "My lord, it's the plague," she said hurriedly. "Ahem. Everyone got the plague after eating rat meat just now. And this plague is a variant. Not only is the effect strong, but the speed of onset and spread is also very fast. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Creation of the World, Binding God Simulator at the Beginning. Author, Yefeng Feng. Chapter 273. Bai-Ze's expression froze for 2 seconds after hearing this. The talent of being immune to poison gas can only be immune to poison gas and rotten gas, etc. Plague is also called the Black Death, which is a type of virus, and there is a huge gap between the two. Therefore, it seems that creatures can't really compete with it. Not only that, Aurora finds it disgusting, so she naturally has never eaten distorted creatures. Moreover, with her realm, even if she eats these meats, she can't be improved. But plague is contagious. This is still a distorted variant of plague. As long as the creatures stay together, they can quickly infect each other. Damn, I was tricked. Bai-Ze frowned. It seems that the other party came prepared. Knowing that he didn't bring any resources, he was going to use its creatures as food. This time, Bai-Ze was too smart. Fortunately, tree people belong to plants, not animals, so they will not be infected with plague. After thinking for a while, Bai-Ze opened the system and said, "There is no way. The insect tide is about to catch up. System, activate the active talent, Holy Light Blessing." Ding, received the host's order, Holy Light Blessing has been activated. You activated the active talent, and then a ray of light descended from the sky, covering your creatures. In an instant, all the injuries of the creatures were healed. They felt unparalleled power, and even the severe pain just now disappeared, as if they were reborn. Bai-Ze smiled, this should be fine. But soon he was dumbfounded. Your creature status is full, but unfortunately the virus in the body has not been cleared. As time goes by, it will eventually break out. How can this be? Holy Light Blessing, Can't it also clear the plague? Ding, holy light blessing only has the effect of restoring blood, and does not have the effect of clearing debuffs. The system gave an answer. It means that holy light blessing is similar to stimulants, or something like adrenaline. You can get the buff effect, but you can't clear the debuff effect. Boom boom. Looking back, Bai-Ze can already detect a large shadow. After a few seconds of silence, Bai-Ze made a major decision. Since he has been tricked, there is nothing wrong with it. Just go all the way. If you get the plague, you get the plague. This is a simulation anyway. It's better to continue to eat those distorted creatures and raise your own level first. After all, when the simulation is over, your own level can be retained, but the plague will disappear. After reaching a conclusion, you issue an oracle to boost the morale of the army, and while the effect of the holy light blessing is still there, you will attack the southeast base in one fell swoop. The creatures roared, because the pain of the holy light blessing was reduced. They became extremely excited. Ding, the host's faith value add 10. It was near noon, the scorching sun rose, and the army took advantage of the dazzling sunlight to directly break into the city. At the moment when the city wall was cracked, countless distorted creatures poured out, and the entire southeast base had already been occupied by wild beasts. Two-headed dogs, distorted rats, and a large number of large cockroaches, as well as the main army of the southeast base, the slave level one-eyed demon wolf, the general level bonethorn wolf, etc. The number is as high as more than 3,000, which is more than the border base. The most terrifying rooftop of the southeast base building, a winged wolf stands at the highest point, exuding the aura of a monarch. You know, it should be the strongest boss of this base. You ordered the meteorite army to start advancing, entangled with the distorted wolf pack of equal number, and the Sword Shield and Dapen tribes split into two groups and crossed the wolf pack to the center of the city. Led by the Sword and Shield Dowdy, they were ready to kill the winged wolf with swords, but unexpectedly, the two tribes were stopped by thousands of figures descending from the sky halfway through their march. The deformed wolf spider with dozens of eyes was hanging upside down under a tall building, and the spider queen behind him had the strength to lead a high-level army. Dowdy decided to change his strategy and eliminate the Spider Queen first. He asked Kunpeng to take Dapen away first to test the specific strength of the winged wolf. At noon the next day, the deformed wolf spider failed to stop the Dapen tribe, and they were entangled by the Sword and Shield tribe. Although there was a small realm difference, Dowdy was still able to fight back and forth with the Spider Queen with the advantage of bloodline. At the same time, the vanguard army of the insect tide had arrived and rushed into the southeast base first, preparing to temporarily suspend your march and wait for the arrival of the large army. In order to avoid being trapped from both sides, the Sea Emperor and the Treeman joined forces to form the rear line of defense of the coalition. The Holy Spirit King Dragon took action, and the emerald green light instantly burned a large number of insects. At this time, you also received intelligence that reinforcements had been sent from both the southwest base and the northeast base. A coalition of tens of thousands of distorted animals, even distorted plants, etc., are rushing to the southeast base. Prepare to form a situation of surrounding mountains on all sides to trap you to death in the southeast base. A large number of your creatures and the opponent's creatures died, the effect of the holy light blessing was slowly disappearing, the Universe Insect Emperor was seriously injured, and Gatenja and the Holy Spirit King Dragon were exhausted. The vanguard of the Zerg alone has thousands of heads, and it is impossible to kill them all. You are hesitating, and suddenly you find that the Dapen clan led by Kunpeng has approached the winged wolf. Kunpeng has perfect confidence in himself. He led all the remaining Dapen to form an encirclement and prepared to test Yikang Lao. Unexpectedly, the other party opened his eyes. Wait, this is... Bai-Ze's voice paused. Bite. Detection successful. Creature name, Winged Wolf. Biological level, Peak of Command. Bite. Warning, warning, warning. Get away, Bai shouted immediately. The system sound just stopped, but it was already too late. Yikanglang couldn't help but opened his huge mouth, and a pure purple beam of light spurted out, and the scorching light was directed towards Kunpeng. Kunpeng reacted quickly, but his body couldn't keep up with his brain. Seeing the scorching light coming towards him, hundreds of Dapen stepped forward to protect the leader. The next second, a dazzling light obscured everything. After the flash, a group of Dapen fell from the sky, covered in charred black, and disintegrated into a piece of dust in mid-air. Kunpeng's colorful feathers were burnt and he fell to the ground seriously injured and dying. Seeing this, Bai took a deep breath with dull eyes. Has a peak-level creature appeared in just one of the 4 outer cities? A big difference is really an insurmountable gap. Kunpeng was only at the peak of his fighting skills at this time. Facing the creatures that commanded the peak, the gap in strength was really too big. However, at this point, Bai finally no longer hesitated. With such powerful creatures out there, what else could he hide? More than half of the Dapen clan died or were injured, and you finally used your trump card. Despair envelops the earth, and Hypachton, the ruler of the universe, descends from the clouds. Creation of the world, binding God simulator at the beginning. Author, Yefeng Feng. Chapter 274. The exciting electromagnetic sound echoed, and the winged wolf, feeling threatened, shook its body, and the wings behind it carried it upward. Confronting Hypergeton, both of them had an inexplicable repressive force. Now is the time. System, use active talent, range freezing. After saying that, Bai Zi's eyes lit up, and he immediately locked the most intense confrontation area. Ding, the area is locked, and the range freezing is activated. After you activate the talent, quickly send down the oracle to disperse all the creatures fighting with the deformed wolf pack. The meteor army received the order, carrying the dying universe insect king into the air, and evacuated the scene in batches. At this moment, the clouds in the sky opened up, and a cold current came down, like a blizzard in the far north, rushing straight to the ground. The wolves standing there were confused. The moment they came into contact with the cold, their bodies became stiff, and then a thick layer of frost covered them completely. The meteor bugs that did not have time to escape, including the tree man, were also frozen into ice sculptures and temporarily lost their ability to move. Seeing this, the winged wolf was shocked. The men who were protecting him instantly lost their ability to move, and some were even frozen to death on the spot. But it had no time to think about it, the horn of the counterattack had already sounded. The meteor bugs that were not affected by the cold dived down. After being frozen into ice sculptures, the wolf tribe's bodies became very fragile. The sharp claws of the meteor bugs could easily cut through the ice sculptures and end their lives. At the same time, the confrontation at the top also began. Hypergeton continuously released long-range skills, and the black fireballs continued to split and hit the winged wolf on the opposite side. The latter suffered a heavy blow and continued to use light to fight back in anger. The skills released by the two creatures were very chaotic, overturning a large area of the surrounding terrain. The building collapsed, the ruins exploded again, and even the chimney on the top floor used to store nuclear energy was broken. Stones and iron walls fell to the ground one after another, affecting many creatures. Both Bai Zi and the distorted creatures suffered heavy casualties. After fighting for an hour, it was almost 2 o'clock, and the dazzling sunlight began to gradually fade away. The two sides were finally going to decide the winner. After being frozen into ice sculptures, the distorted wolf tribe was almost wiped out, and the distorted dog tribe and rat tribe also died in large numbers. In the center, the multi-eyed wolf spider was eliminated by the sword and shield tribe, and the glutton held a long sword and pierced the abdomen of the spider queen, ending the competition. Similarly, at the end, the winged grey wolf was exhausted. The long-range light could not hurt Hyperzeton, and the melee combat fell into Hyperzaton's trap again. Having its wings chopped off by its double sickle form, it fell to the ground and struggled to death. However, Bai-Ze also paid a heavy price in this battle. The Dapen tribe was almost wiped out, and only 2,000 meteor bugs remained. Although they defeated the distorted wolf spider, a large number of sword and shield tigers were poisoned by them, and their faces turned purple and black. Moreover, after 2 hours of fierce fighting, the effect of the holy light blessing had long disappeared, and the mutant Black Death virus broke out again. Under the double pressure, some members of the Sword and Shield tribe died on the spot, and the Sword and Shield Dowdy was also in a sluggish state, poisoned, and full of debuffs in the body. Ahem. It's too late, my lord. I can already see the silhouette of the insect tide in the distance from here. And the reinforcements from the next base have also been outflanked from the flank. If we don't leave now, I guess we won't have a chance. After successfully occupying the southeast base, Aurora hurriedly reported the situation. She has a unique eye skill that is more useful than a telescope and can see the situation in the distance. Hearing this, Bai-Ze also knew it well. You issued an oracle, informed the news that the insect tide and reinforcements are about to arrive, and asked your creatures to quickly replenish. Don't take any rest, and then continue on the road. After reorganizing the army, there are 1,000 tree people left in the back row, and 500 sea kings left, and the total number is less than 5,000. Hypogeton killed the winged wolf and swallowed it, gaining some power. The Sword and Shield Dowdy knew that his life was coming to an end, and boldly swallowed the Spider Silk Queen to improve himself. Replenish the status. The large army is still coughing up blood and fever, and the Black Death has reached its peak. In this case, even if the meteorite is in full status, the marching speed will be slowed down by half, and it will definitely be caught up by the insect tide before reaching the central base. There is no way, the remaining Dapen clan and the Sword and Shield clan who are poisoned by multiple poisons take the initiative to step out. After the dying Kunpeng and Dowdy recovered, they decided to stay in this base to cover the rear of the main force and slow down the advance of the insect tide. This is a bad strategy, but you still agreed. The remaining 3 tribes, a total of 3,500 joint forces, left the 2 tribes and left the southeast base, preparing to go to the central base. The sun gradually began to set, and the 2 tribes left in the southeast base were already weak and powerless. The mixture of viruses and poisons made the Sword and Shield tribe not even have the strength to stand up. The next night, the insect tide passed through, and the 2 tribes fought desperately, but were eventually submerged in the sea of insects, and no bones were left. At the same time, the support troops from the other 2 bases had also arrived, but the insect tide had already gone crazy and fought indiscriminately. The support troops that arrived here were swallowed up by the insect tide, and even the 2 cities in the southwest and northeast were destroyed and occupied by the insect tide. A large number of insects have evolved, and the number of warrior-level creatures has begun to increase among them. More than a dozen commander-level giant insects have evolved. The number of insect tides has exceeded 100,000, occupying half of the country, reaching a peak value. On the other side, the sun has completely set on the way. Countless creatures cannot resist the invasion of the Black Death and fall down one by one. The Universe Insect King did not survive, and the number of allied forces continued to decrease. The Holy Spirit King Dragon was also infected. Fortunately, as the dragon god of life and nature, it has powerful antibodies and can resist it better than other creatures. The coalition forces are still advancing. The closer they get to the central base, the higher the realm of the creatures that come to block the way. With continuous sacrifices, the large army barely broke through the encirclement and shook off the insect tides following behind. At this moment, it is above the top of the central base. Witnessing the withering of everything, it laughed wildly. Ha ha ha, the energy is almost ready. Soon, you will become the last nutrients. I just didn't expect to see Hypergeton here. Withered turned 3 heads, talking about Hypergeton, without a trace of fear, but a little excited. It knew Hypergeton, not only knew him, it also knew Gatenja. So, it showed this look. Creation of the world, binding God simulator at the beginning. Author, Yefeng Feng. Chapter 275. Late at night on the second day, your creatures finally arrived at their destination, and the remaining 3,000 or so troops were at the gates of the city. The central base, the most magnificent base in the distorted world, is completely blocked by an electrified power grid. Inside is a series of irregular buildings made of steel bars and cement, surrounded by lighthouses on all sides, and a semicircular building in the center, which is as large as the central stadium of the imperial capital. Inside the base, there is also a wide river, extending from the side forest, with green bubbling industrial wastewater, and it is bottomless. But the most terrifying thing is that you found broken chimneys in many places in the city, constantly emitting a stream of light green gas. Through your observation, it is a large amount of nuclear radiation that is constantly leaking, filling every corner of the central base, making the entire base like a biochemical factory. The radiation level is too high. And why does this building look a bit like Chernobyl? I have to say, it does look a bit like it. But it is obvious that the radiation level here is much higher than that of Baizi's previous life. You know that you may not be able to survive this terrible place, but at least you have to find out the source. You split the army into two groups and ordered the Sea Emperors to enter the flank forest and sneak into the river to the center of the base. In this way, you can enter the city without injury and find opportunities to support the main force from behind. And you speculate that the final boss of the entire city should be in the center, so the remaining two tribes will attack from the front, aiming at the semicircular building in the center base. The plan is made, and with the last bit of faith, the army roars and the siege officially begins. Ding, host's faith value add 10. The meteorite worm was infected with plague and knew that his life was coming to an end, so he took the initiative to lead and used his hard shell to break through the outer power grid defense. The tree man followed closely behind, and the army rushed forward. The city was gray and felt the enemy invasion in an instant. The distorted creatures began to gather in large numbers. The sewer opening was opened, and the water column broke through the fog. The distorted rats, centipedes, and giant cockroaches in the sewer jumped out one after another. The apes with pustules and tumors all over their bodies living in the building also appeared with the dog tribe. Shadows gathered in the sky. Corrupt crows, nighthawks, and blind sparrows were flying around, constantly aiming their sights at the location of the army, and sharp shouts were heard. It turns out that the creatures in Suhi are also distorted types. Baizi wiped his sweat and said. Faced with such a scene, he naturally would not despise it. Next, Baizi waved his hand, and a world will was transmitted into the creature's skull. Go forward to the death, never retreat. The word spirit continued to fluctuate, igniting every cell in the creature's body. The meteorite worms roared, and the power of faith reached its peak. The meteorite worms became violent, and under the urging of faith, they rushed forward madly, and one by one they fell from the sky like meteorites. The distorted creatures were killed on a large scale, and the terrain was bombed into pits and pits, with many sinkholes. This suicide attack quickly reduced the number of meteor bugs, but it also tore a bloody path, and hundreds of distorted creatures died. At this time, the vicinity shook, and a creature with half of its body made of machinery and half of its body made of hard muscle rushed out from behind the building. It was a modified cyborg. It had the strength of a commander at the peak, and the missiles equipped in its hands kept firing, knocking down many meteor bugs. Hypergeton was furious, and teleported to the cyborg, grabbed his hands with his pincers, and wrestled with him in close combat. Aurora used magic to clear the way, ordered the tree people to break through the crack, and the Holy Spirit King Dragon guarded the back. The emerald green light in the sky burned a large number of distorted birds to death. Another mid-level commander of the Rift Eagle rushed out and went straight to the Holy Spirit King Dragon. The two collided and the surrounding fog was pushed away. You did not let the tree people stay, but confirmed Aurora's idea and let them enter the inner city first. On the other side, the waterway was not safe either. After the Sea King family entered the biochemical river, they had a slight reverse reaction. The radiation level in the water was too high, even with the poison gas immunity talent, it was a bit unbearable. In addition, a large number of piranhas gushed out of the river after the distortion, their teeth became sharper, their bodies expanded several times, and their swimming speed was extremely fast. The leading distorted turbo shark, with a realm as high as the commander, fought fiercely with Gatenja in the water, using its flexible body to avoid the petrification ray every time. You let go and let your creatures kill the enemy while devouring them to replenish energy. During this period, the remaining meteor bugs were filled with debuffs, various toxins, radiation, viruses, and other things gathered. But with this power, the meteor bugs evolved, and evolved in batches to the initial stage of warriors, gaining a short-term power bonus. Hypergeton is about to decide the winner. He turned his grief and anger into strength, his hands turned into sickle forms, and used the strongest attack. The light fell from the sky, the dazzling starlight covered the sky, and the black light wave was like a cross, as if the god of death had come, sentencing all living beings to death. The starlight bloomed, and the bionic man turned into ashes in an instant. The deformed creatures around looked up at the stars, and finally lost their color and disappeared as simple lines. After the aftermath, multiple debuffs erupted in Hyperzeton's body. It half knelt on the ground, supporting the ground with one hand, feeling very depressed. All the deformed creatures around it had died. The tall building was cut in half and fell diagonally. A 1,000-meter-long knife mark appeared on the ground, forming a rift valley. Even the fog was cut apart, and the space was fluctuated, forming ripples. It was 5 o'clock in the morning, and the sun was about to rise. This battle dragged on for too long, and the insect tide finally caught up from behind. You saw thousands of gray figures advancing a few hundred meters away, so you quickly ordered the army to run to the inner city. With the help of the tree people, dragging the meteor bugs that broke out of the Black Death, they were barely able to move. The number of meteor bugs killed once again exceeded half, and now there are only 500 left, and the tree people have 1,000 left. The leaders of the two tribes, including the Holy Spirit King Dragon, all had internal bleeding. At the same time, they encountered a brutal battle, and the number of the Sea Kings was reduced to a freezing point. Many Sea Kings sank to the bottom of the river, and Gatenja petrified the enemy leader. Dragging their half-broken bodies, they also began to move towards the center of the central base. On the morning of the third day, the sun rose, and the armies of both sides rushed all night and finally arrived at the center. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Creation of the World, Binding God Simulator at the beginning. Author, Yefeng Feng. Chapter 276. Behind them, the insect swarm has entered the periphery of the central city. As vast as a long dragon, its dense tentacles are trembling, and the ground is shaking as it walks. A pair of scarlet eyes exudes an extremely dangerous aura, and the sound of gurgling is like a warning before the disaster. Bai Zi said before that the insect plague can be called the fourth disaster. His own meteorite insects are still like this, and the insect swarm behind him, which has exceeded 100,000, is enough to flatten everything. Moreover, their number has not yet reached the peak, and they are still gathering. It is hard to imagine that Bai Zi has encountered nearly 20,000 distorted creatures along the way. In addition to the other bases, is there more than 300,000 distorted creatures in the entire distorted planet. You feel extremely terrible and it is difficult to contact further. The insect swarm has occupied the outer city at this time, and the remaining distorted creatures have been devoured by them. The two armies met under the semicircular building and found that there was a huge tower behind the building, which was emitting high-purity radiation. Suddenly, the tower shook twice in succession, and a pure black energy rushed into the sky, breaking through the clouds and dyeing the nearby sky black. You opened the eye of God to observe, and were immediately shocked. Ding, biological identification completed. Biological name, Withering. Biological level, Peak Commander level. Introduction, a distorted creature created by combining soul sand with black skeleton genes, plus secondary distortion, has obtained power that ordinary people cannot reach. Ding, the system detected the reaction of the origin of the world. Ding, the system detected the reaction of the origin of the world. 2 consecutive calls made by Ze's eyes more solemn. It's withering. The creatures from that world appeared here? Or in the form of distorted creatures? Bai Ze couldn't help but sigh. More importantly, the system actually said that it had detected the reaction of the origin of the world. There are no other creatures here, so the origin of the world must be in the body of the withering in front of you. You have noticed that the origin of the world is in the body of the withering. It should be the final boss of this distorted world. Fortunately, no alien race has appeared so far. The opponent is likely to have evacuated after using up the world. You only need to defeat the withering in front of you and take back the origin of the world to resolve this war. The withering has fallen at this time, and its 3 heads are shaking. Without waiting for you to speak, an extremely wide explosion strikes with it as the center. There is no shelter around, and the explosion hits your creatures, and hundreds of creatures die tragically. The Holy Spirit King Dragon and Hypergeton join forces and rush towards the withering. The opponent keeps dropping withering bombs to consume both remotely. The Holy Spirit King Dragon acts as a meat shield, escorting Hypergeton forward, and after being hit by the bomb, it will have the withering effect, causing heavy bleeding all over the body. Under various debuffs, the weakened Holy Spirit King Dragon could no longer hold on and fell to the ground, dying. Hypergeton entered the close attack range, immediately changed its form, and used its sharp sickle to severely injure the withering. The sun rose completely, and hundreds of thousands of insect tides destroyed high-rise buildings, broke through the power grid protection, filled the Abyss River, and surrounded your last army. They were like hell devils, stepping forward tirelessly. The fire in the central base spread, and the red light rendered the clouds. You are on the verge of death, trapped in the central city, and there is no way to escape. Hypergeton is still fighting with the withering. In order to buy time, you order all the remaining creatures to resist the insect tide attack at all costs. The meteor worm launched a suicide attack, accelerated its body to the speed of a falling meteor, and then smashed into the dense insect tide, hoping to weaken the opponent's number in this way. The tree people manipulated the vines to form high walls, while the sea kings charged directly, fighting with the insect army without fear of life and death. However, the number of insect tides was too large to be completely eliminated. There were tens of thousands of them, countless. As soon as one died, another one would appear in the surrounding forest. Among them, there were many warrior-level and even commander-level giant insects leading the formation, which could kill your creatures at will. Except for the tree people, all animal creatures suffered heavy damage. Aurora barely cast magic, but it could only cause a small-scale attack. After resting for a while, the Holy Spirit King Dragon forced himself to join the battle again. It ejected rays of light from its mouth, burning from the center of the city all the way to the edge of the city, making the earth extremely hot. In a blink of an eye, the insect tide was reduced by thousands, but more and more insects followed, and the Sea King clan was completely wiped out. Gaetonye was exhausted and completely submerged by the insect tide. The last treeman stepped forward, and the Treeman King and his team fought hard. Noon of the 3rd day, up to now, the meteor Zerg has been wiped out, the number of Zerg tides has only increased, and the remaining treemen are still struggling to hold on. Fortunately, Hyperjeton finally won. After the last slash fell, Withering began to fall from the sky, seriously injured, and his breath was weak. Seeing the scene in front of him, Baizi's heart fell. Great, it's finally over. The Zerg tide is about to engulf the world. As long as we seize the origin of the world, everything will be saved. Baizi swallowed silently. Then, he waved his hand and gave the oracle to Death Scythe Jeton. You let Death Scythe Jeton end the withering and prepare to seize the origin of the world. Death Scythe Jeton has defeated 3 commander-level peak creatures in a row. Now it is in tatters and has reached its limit. But after receiving the order, it still slowly stood up, raised the sharp sickle in its hand, and prepared to pierce the withering in front of it. You looked at the scene with great expectations in your heart. Unexpectedly, the disaster you had a premonition of happened. What? That light is. Could it be really guessed? Baizi's heart trembled. Death Scythe Jeton pierced with his sickle, but was blocked by an inexplicable black barrier. The withering, which was originally seriously injured and dying, was slowly lifted up by a beam of light, and all the surrounding poisonous gas, radiation, viruses, etc. were converging into his body. A black whirlwind blew up in the world, and dark particles fell from the clouds, gathering at one point and blooming. Withering floated in the air, absorbing the power of the storm, and his body was distorted. Baizi opened the eye of God, and his pupils kept shrinking. Ding, system detection was successful. Name of creature, Withering Storm. Creature level, Monarch level elementary. Introduction, the king of the product of the distorted world, absorbing a large amount of negative energy in the world, gaining unparalleled power, and possessing the power of the monarch to command all things. Withering Storm. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. Creation of the world, binding God simulator at the beginning. Author, Yefeng Feng. Chapter 277. Baizi opened his mouth and exclaimed in surprise. In fact, he had felt it just now. It was said that the Third Order world, even the origin of the world appeared. How could there be no monarch-level creatures? And the big guy who appeared in front of him also confirmed his thoughts. Monarch creatures, the standard of the Third Order world. Withering Storm was born, with a swollen head. It has multiple heads, and tentacles that are waving wantonly. Its eyes constantly spray purple beams, causing unimaginable damage to the nearby terrain, and the storm guards float around to assist in defense and attack. All creatures gathered their eyes here, and the exhausted Death Scythe Jeton also stood up again and returned to his original form. At this time, a purple light rushed over, and the tree man who had no time to dodge was instantly evaporated, and thousands of giant insects in the back row were also burned to death. The monarch has come. You immediately issue an order for all leaders to assemble. The Holy Spirit Dragon dived down. Aurora jumped off the Treeman King, and rode the Holy Spirit Dragon directly into the air. The Treeman King led the remaining Treemen to block the rear from being broken through by the insect tide. The 3 commanders surrounded the Withering Storm, and the battle was about to break out in a flash. Aurora used magic to raise rows of wooden vines from the ground, tightly wrapping the Withering Storm above. Hyperjeton raised his 2 pincers and took advantage of the opponent being controlled to launch a series of scorching black fireballs to attack, while the Holy Spirit Dragon spit out emerald green rays to assist the attack. But both of them reached their limits. It was a miracle that they could attack, but their power was greatly reduced. After the light explosion, many purple lights suddenly shot out from the shrouded fog. Hyperjeton blocked it with his giant pincers. The Holy Spirit Dragon threw Aurora off and took the attack alone. The light pierced through the Holy Spirit Dragon, and the Holy Spirit Dragon was killed. Aurora, who was about to land, caught herself with vines and looked forward. The withering storm, which had been attacked by a round of attacks, was not hurt at all. It moved its tentacles, and the purple light in its pupils was accumulating again. At this time, Hyperzeton flashed and appeared directly in front of it, opening its pincers to control it. The sudden obstruction caused the withering storm's ray to deviate, and unexpectedly hit the insect tied behind, and thousands of giant insects were evaporated into ash. Hyperzeton burned all the power in his body, and boiling heat emerged from his body, mixed with the breath of despair from the abyss. Aurora stepped on the wooden vines and switched to bows and arrows. The long-range arrows kept hitting the withering storm and the nearby storm guards, but unfortunately the explosion could not cause any damage to them. The gap is too big, the bow and arrow can't cause any damage. Hypageddon is also 2 levels apart, even the god-level bloodline is difficult to cross. Witnessing the tragic battle, Baizi's heart tightened again. He thought about it and found that he had already exhausted all his skills and had no available talents and resources. Now, he had to pin his hopes on Hypergeddon. There is a saying that goes, when you encounter difficulties, give your heart to hope. Hypageddon felt your faith, and the crystal yellow part of its body began to flash, and the breath of fear and despair spread. The cells in its blood rose, roaring like a beast, and entered the stage of accelerated transformation. The viruses, toxins, and even radiation in the body were swallowed up and integrated into one, becoming a part of Hypergeddon's power. Ding, Hypergeddon is in an advanced state. Baizi widened his eyes, with a hint of disbelief. But after thinking carefully, it should be the extraordinary energy it swallowed all the way to fight that worked. Those energies that command high-level and peak creatures, combined with the current battle, gave birth to Hyperzeton's breakthrough. The Black Death virus gradually dissipated, and Hyperzeton seemed to be reborn. Its decadent state was lifted, and it transformed its double sickles and slashed at the withering storm fiercely. The withering storm screamed and waved its tentacles in an attempt to get rid of Hyperzeton. The storm guards around came to help, but 2 arrows passed by and hit accurately, and ejected it with an explosion. Hypageddon crossed his double sickles and fiercely cut off several heads of the withering storm. The only one left was swaying in the wind. Baizi had seen the withering storm more than once in his previous life, so he knew it very well. The opponent's melee ability was extremely weak, and there was only an extremely powerful long-range ability. As long as Hyperzeton was allowed to fight with it in close combat, it had almost no means of self-protection. At 3 p.m., with the withering storm about to be defeated, the Death Scythe Geddon also exhausted all its energy. At this moment, the withering storm accumulated all its own energy and filled it in the swollen skull. Hypergeddon felt the high-temperature energy fluctuations, but the double sickles firmly pierced the withering storm, and it was impossible to get away. In the sky, a huge explosion occurred, the black hurricane spread, dark particles fell, and the residual power of the explosion pushed away the giant insects in groups. The withering storm exploded, and the center of the explosion was shrouded in smoke, and the 2 huge sounds disappeared. Baizi sighed silently, feeling a little regretful. It's only 1 step away from advancing to the peak of the commander. What a pity. But forget it, Hypergeddon has plenty of opportunities to advance. And if the withering storm doesn't die, he will have no chance at all. Fortunately, after the withering storm dies, the origin of the world will be liberated. As long as you master the origin of the world, everything will end. System, start extracting the origin of the world, Baizi shouted. After a short silence, nothing happened. Baizi was puzzled. What's going on? Don't you want to recycle the origin of the world? The system slowly answered Baizi's question. Ding, the origin of the world has not been liberated and cannot be recovered. Suddenly, Baizi frowned and a question mark popped up again. The origin of the world has not been liberated, and the withering storm has not been destroyed. Could it be that the origin of the world is not in it? After saying that, Baizi urgently used the eye of God. He looked around and found no red spots. In other words, there are no other creatures here except the insectide. That's even more wrong. The insectide followed closely behind. If the origin of the world was in their bodies, they would have given an early warning. Why did the system give a prompt only after entering the central base? Baizi was still thinking, but the battle below was still going on. Witherstorm died, Hyperzaton died, but the insect army continued to march. They did not stop, which made the tree people confused. On the third night, after Aurora's fierce resistance, the tree people were finally defeated and swallowed up by the insect tide. The world was flooded, and the distorted planet fell. But before dying, Aurora saw a light and shadow descending from the sky, like a god. Creation of the world, binding God simulator at the beginning. Author, Yefeng Feng. Chapter 278. The moment the light and shadow appeared, hundreds of thousands of Zergs exploded and died. Blood was like rain, filling the clear sky, broken tentacles were splashing, demons were dancing wildly, the scene was spectacular and breathtaking. Then, from a small number of giant insect corpses, glittering crystals emerged, in different colors, red, green, blue and purple. You can feel that these crystals contain huge and pure energy, which can be used for absorption or enhancement. Then, all the crystals quickly gathered, decomposed into a stream of energy, and rushed towards the light and shadow. Your biological consciousness has reached its limit and your life has ended. Ding. This simulation ends. I'm so awesome. Don't. I'm almost done watching it, can you show it more? Baizi leaned forward, intending to stop it, but he was powerless. The simulation ended, and all the images in front of him disappeared. Ding. The system gave an evaluation. Suddenly, several subtitles popped up in front of Baizi. Evaluation 1, the host's idea is good, but he lacks professional knowledge and fell into the opponent's trap. He stopped the organisms from being infected with the plague. His combat power was greatly reduced in the middle and late stages of the battle, and his speed of action also slowed down. Evaluation 2, he lacked intelligence too much. He fought blindly all the way without a real strategy and was completely controlled by the opponent. Staring at the two lines of subtitles, Baizi was quite helpless. Lack of intelligence was not what he thought. This was a special mission. 10 creators died, and even the creation building was short of information. What kind of information could he get when he just went up? However, that's what he said. After this round of simulation, Baizi did master a lot of information. Especially the first point of the system evaluation, he did lack professional knowledge. For example, a few Zerg actually have energy crystals in their bodies. Digging out their energy crystals and absorbing them seems to be much better than swallowing them directly. But what Baizi couldn't figure out the most was the latter part. The withering storm was obviously gone, so why couldn't the system recover the origin of the world? Could it be that there are still aliens in the world? The origin of the world is actually in the aliens, not in the withering storm. Finally, there is that light and shadow. Baizi feels right. It should be the thing that the 11th creator said before. But the strange thing is, what is it? A distorted creature? Or an alien? Baizi was silent for a moment. But if it is an alien, why can't the eye of God detect it, and see its weaknesses? It's a bit confusing, and suddenly the system pops up subtitles again. Ding, please choose the war talent to be solidified in this round of simulation. After seeing the pop-up window, Baizi put the previous things behind him. He concentrated on thinking, or keep the immunity to poison gas. Otherwise, he won't even be able to survive on the distorted planet. System, keep the war talent, immunity to poison gas. Ding, Temporary solidification of talent is successful. This simulation ends, cooling time is 30 minutes. Taking a deep breath, Bai-Ze exited this interface. There are many things he can't figure out, and it seems that they will be revealed in the next round of simulation. As for the next step, Bai-Ze wants to communicate with the outside world to understand the situation of the game. Beep beep beep. Bai-Ze connected his mobile phone and called Xia Yunyu. After the ringing sounded a few times, someone on the other side quickly answered the phone. Beep beep, hello, is this Xiaobai? Seeing the person who called Bai-Ze, Xia Yunyu's eyebrows showed a hint of joy. Yes, it's me. Have you finished the dungeon? Do you want me to pick you up? After getting Bai-Ze's reply, Xia Yunyu hurriedly said. On the other end, Bai-Ze paused and said, no. I just want to ask, how is your side, has the game started? Hee, don't worry, the first round of our game is over. Besides, the opponent of the game directly gave up, and didn't even play against us, Xia Yunyu said in a good mood. But you have to hurry up. It's best to come back 2 days before the end of the game. I guess there are a series of rules to understand in the second stage of the game. If you come back late, you may not be able to catch up. Bai-Ze nodded gently after hearing this. Even if Xia Yunyu didn't say it, he knew that he had to speed up. After all, after fighting the distorted planet, not to mention the number of creatures lost, their condition would not be very good. It is necessary to leave time for the creatures to slow down. Then replenish the number of losses after the battle to cope with the second stage of the game. Otherwise, it is very likely that the seamless connection will be worse than the original combat power during the game. Okay, I will pay attention. By the way, how are the other competition areas? Bai-Ze continued to ask. Well, other competition areas are similar to us, just the ace players we have seen. They also lost a round of games because their opponents gave up. Wow. That's right, Xia Yunyu suddenly said wow, as if she thought of something. With a happy expression, he said, our plan worked. The other regions have been investigated by the opponents. No one has come to us. As expected, Tang Qingcheng beside him added. Then she approached Xia Yunyu and talked to Bai-Ze. Unfortunately, other regions, especially those ace teams, did not show their strength in the first round. So, we did not see their creatures. After thinking for a while, Tang Qingcheng added, but it doesn't matter. In the future competitions, the number of people will continue to decrease, and then we will definitely match with local players with certain strength. Those people will not give up, so we can test the strength of the aces. When you come back, we will explain it to you one by one. Hearing this, Bai-Ze agreed. But, he still has a most important question. What about the Imperial Capital Division? Have you seen it? I mean, the goddess. The two people who heard this question looked at each other on the other end of the phone. I have seen it. We have seen the Imperial Capital Division, but we still focus on observing it. The goddess did not show up, she didn't even come to the competition site, and the other side also gave up. It's like. Tang Qingcheng paused and said, it was premeditated in advance. Neither side came to the scene, as if they had made an appointment in advance. Bai-Ze nodded woodenly, feeling a little pressure. Damn, there won't be any shady dealings, right? Fortunately, I didn't participate in the competition, otherwise I would be in the open while the other party was in the dark, and I would have completely lost the initiative. In the future, we will continue to observe the Imperial Capital Division. When you come back, we will tell you if there is any information. Yeah, we have another game soon. If you have nothing else, I'll hang up first. Xia Yunyu grabbed the phone and said. Okay, then you go to the game, bye. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Creation of the World, Binding God Simulator at the beginning. Author, Yefeng Feng. Chapter 279. On the other side, on the first day of the competition, the battles in the major competition areas were in full swing. The team list hanging high on the screen kept changing, some people stayed, and some people left. On the first day of the competition alone, nearly 1/10 of the people were eliminated. Among them, the most dazzling one was the Imperial Capital Division. Anyone who drew the goddess gave up and admitted defeat. No one dared to come to the scene, and no one had ever seen the goddess. The floating viewing room in the Imperial Capital Center Stadium. There are walls on all four sides here, and the current situation of the game on the screen can only be viewed through a floor-to-ceiling window. Standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, the corners of the Imperial Capital Principal's mouth rose slightly. Beside him, there was a tall man in a suit, who was an inspector sent by the Federation. Both of them had joy on their faces, as if something had come true. In the afternoon, the sun set, and the reddish glow shone through the floor-to-ceiling window into the dim viewing room. There was a chair at the back, and the person sitting on it was illuminated by a faint blush. She was wearing a casual dress, and on her head was a crown made of pearls and gems. The golden and white reflecting the glimmer of the setting sun. The girl's eyes were frosty, her face was cold, and her pupils were motionless, with a sense of emptiness. At this time, the principal of the Imperial Capital turned around. He showed a gentle and warm smile and said, "The first stage of the game has been arranged. You don't have to feel any burden. With your strength, you will win even if you play." "Yes," the girl replied in a cold voice. "Prepare well for the second stage of the game. It all depends on you next. You have to know that I have told you since you were a child. You are born to be the hope of the Federation and the supreme light of the creators. Others can do it, but only you can't lose," the principal of the Imperial Capital said slowly. After 2 seconds of silence, the girl nodded calmly and said, "Yes." After speaking softly, the girl raised her head. With a reddish glow, the setting sun shines in and moves upward. It illuminates her blue-green pupils, which are extremely clear. Ding, based on the above data, the host has obtained a total of 10,000 Genesis points this time. Ding, the cooling time has expired, and the host can start the next simulation at any time. Back to ByZe, the cooling time has just expired. And the Genesis points reward ByZe received in this round of simulation. System, start a new round of simulation. ByZe did not hesitate at all. Ding, the simulated plane war has begun. The Genesis points required for the simulation are 10,000 points. Yes/no. Yes, ByZe confirmed. Just right, what you earn makes up for what you lose. Ding, the Genesis points payment is successful, and this simulation officially begins. Ding, 10 consecutive draws have been issued. Please choose the war talent you want to carry in the simulation. In an instant, 10 talents appeared on the system panel. The poison gas solidified in the last round is immune to automatic locking, and there are 2 empty slots left to carry talents. ByZe looked from top to bottom and operated with his fingers. Speed, blue, passive skill, creature movement speed bonus. If the team fights, double movement speed is obtained in the out-of-combat state. Lightning and thunder, purple, a one-time active skill. After use, it can cause a thunder in the designated area. The thunder has a penetrating effect and can paralyze the creature's actions. 2 passive talents and 1 active talent. This is ByZe's choice. There are too many creatures on the distorted planet, and it is estimated that there are about 300,000 or more. With so many, even with offensive talents, they can't be cleaned up, and the benefits are far less than with passive bonus talents. And if you want to do it yourself, then it will inevitably attract the attention of the other party. In order to outrun the insect tide, this speed is extremely important. As for the last one, it is purely because it is the only purple talent among the 10 talents. I'm sure, I'll choose these 3 talents. Ding, War talent confirmed. Please select the items to be carried in this round of simulation. Carried items, God's Authority, God's Eye. Carryable items, Portal, S-level prop card, Meteorite Fall, S-level prop card. Don't carry any items, start simulation. Ding, received the host's order, this round of simulation officially begins. Inside the mother planet, the 5 major tribes opened their eyes and looked at each other. Feeling the unscathed body and the extremely real memory in their minds. They knew that it must be the great God who took action again. Ding, host's faith value add 10. This round, Bai-Ze is ready to change his strategy. The teleportation location of the teleportation channel cannot be changed, but the marching direction of the creatures can be. Generally speaking, the teleportation location is in the southeast corner, below the border base. Then I will bypass the border base directly and attack the southeast and southwest cities directly. Coincidentally, there are several rivers that connect from the southwest forest, across the southwest base, all the way to the central base. The key is to be fast. Bai-Ze has to leave all the insects behind before they can react. The most important point is that Bai-Ze already knows that the origin of the world is in the central city. In this way, there is no need to worry about making a wrong prediction. You have made a series of plans and explained them to your creatures. With the experience of the previous time, you also specially found the fastest giant bird in the mother planet. Prepare to connect a line to continuously transport resources and supplies to ensure the normal march of the large army. I hope the resources of the planet can hold up Bai-Ze side. Moreover, when the insect tide passes through, if it floods the transmission entrance, it is very likely to cut off the supply of resources. At this time, it depends on the speed of the army. It is necessary to rush into the central city before the insect tide arrives and take down the leader of the other party in one fell swoop. After hearing your plan, the creatures are extremely excited. After the last round of devouring, 1/3 of your creatures have entered the general level with new powers. They can't wait to make a big fuss. The first morning, tens of thousands of troops poured into the connecting channel and entered the foggy distorted planet again. Poison gas immunity is activated, and the poisonous fog and radiation in the air cannot cause harm to your creatures. The army is in a state of being out of combat, so the army's speed is doubled. You use induction to first order the army to advance to the nearby border base. And prepare to change direction midway and pull the Sea Kings out of the main force. Let them sneak into the forest on the flank of Southwest City and march all the way to Southwest City along the river. When your main force breaks through Southeast City, you can directly attack Southwest City and bypass the reinforcements from Northeast City. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. Creation of the world, binding God simulator at the beginning. Author, Yefeng Feng. Chapter 280. Tens of thousands of extraordinary troops began to move forward, and the ground nearby was shaking as they ran. During the march, a small number of worms, centipedes, barefoot cockroaches, and other insects blocked the way from time to time. Because of the experience from last time, the army eliminated them with long-range means and was not contaminated by the rotten fluid, causing many casualties. Then, you ordered the creatures to dissect the others' corpses and find the crystals in their bodies for absorption. Although the probability of a distorted creature giving birth to a crystal is 1 in 10, just one crystal can allow your creatures to break through the general. In order to avoid being infected with messy viruses, this is the best way. Noon on the first day, the large army is not tired and moves forward steadily. You can vaguely see the corrupt crows hovering in the sky through the fog, leaving in groups for a while and returning in groups for a while. You understand that this is the other party's way of monitoring you. At the same time, the further you go, the more zergs come to obstruct you, and the ground begins to tremble. You pretend not to see these corrupt crows and look to the back of the forest. Over there, you can already vaguely see a group of black shadows, which are constantly gathering and expanding in size, reaching more than 20,000. You know that the Zerg tide is coming, so you order the large army to speed up the march again. With the experience of last time, you accurately bypassed the quicksand area and did not encounter the sandworms. The large army left the Zerg tide far behind, so that you could not see the black shadows when you looked back. The first night, taking advantage of the night, the large army has already approached the border base, and the corrupt crows in the sky are circling more and more. But at this moment, you ordered Hyperjeton to suddenly attack, and the corrupt crows were unable to react, and a turbid black fireball had already fallen. All the corrupt crows were hit, turned into ashes in an instant, and fell from the sky. Taking this opportunity, the coalition forces immediately changed direction, bypassed the spacious border base in front, and marched directly to the northwest region. The contact was cut off, and the insect tide was still moving towards the border base, and did not turn around to chase you. Hee, it worked, Vize clenched his fists. The other party has been monitoring me, so let it monitor me for a while. When I reach the designated location, I will cut off the monitoring. If it doesn't know my movements at that time, it will not be able to turn the direction of the insect tide in time. Of course, this world belongs to the other party, and it is not difficult for it to find me again. But the important thing is that there is a blank period during this period. This period of time is enough. You waved your hand and took the Sea King family out alone and went to the northwest forest. The remaining 4 tribes have a full 10,000 troops, rushing to the southeast base at full speed, attacking the city at the fastest speed. Late at night on the first day, the moon was dim. With the help of darkness and fog, the other party could not find the movement of your creatures. At this moment, a fire suddenly appeared outside the southeast base, and a ray of emerald green light shot out, immediately piercing through the 2-centimeter thick heavy iron door. The tree army filed in and rushed into the city at lightning speed. 5,000 meteor bugs were entrenched in the sky, and they directly launched an indiscriminate range bombing. They hit the ground like meteorites. The acceleration effect given by the speed of the soldiers greatly increased the power of the skills at this moment. The southeast base was caught off guard. Because the surveillance was cut off, the leader of the other party did not know your marching movements. You did not order the creatures in the southeast base to prepare for war in advance. As a result, the scattered wolf pack on the ground was bombed by you, and suffered heavy casualties in an instant. The winged wolf reacted and organized his wolf pack to resist in a hurry. The one-eyed demon wolf and the bone-thorn wolf teamed up to collide with the tree man in front, but after a while of fighting, they found that they had no reinforcements. Looking carefully, the wellhead of the sewer had been blown into a large pit. The deformed rats and other deformed creatures wanted to rush out of the sewer to help, but when they reached the end of the wellhead, they were blocked by a group of creatures holding swords and shields on their heads. The sword and shield clan had fierce eyes, and the massacre began here. Countless deformed rats and deformed insects were splashed on the spot. Aurora rode on the Holy Spirit King Dragon, and the Tree Man army led by her was unstoppable, and the wolf pack retreated step by step. The tumor giant ape and the 2-headed mutant dog on the land realized that something was wrong and crawled out of the ruins, but before they took 2 steps forward, the sky above their heads was covered. The rocks slid down from the sky, grabbed the deformed creatures and smashed them to death on the ground, and the wind wall they launched even divided the battlefield. Seeing the desolate scene in the base, Yikang Lang was a little panicked. Looking at the spider group, the spider that had just fallen from the top of the building was knocked down from the air by the meteorite bug, causing large-scale damage to the ground. The spider Silk Queen was entangled by the sword and shield glutton. This time, knowing that the opponent would use poison, it was much more vigilant and almost gave the spider Silk Queen a chance. The fire spread in the southeast base, light, fireballs, meteorites, and hurricanes. Various disaster-level forces swept across. The entire base turned into purgatory, the dying tumor giant ape roared and screamed, and the flames attached to its whole body, like a demon that had just crawled out of hell, and finally turned into a pool of ashes. Witnessing everything, Bai Zi looked quite happy. With such a big commotion, the leader of the other party should know where I am. But now, it is probably very busy. The insect tide was left far behind, and the southeastern base was suddenly attacked. Everything is unknown and completely out of its control. Taking advantage of this opportunity, we must attack the southeastern base in one fell swoop, and we must not let any of them escape. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Yikang Lang squatted on the top floor of the building, seeing that his men were about to die and the situation was extremely unfavorable to him. He flapped his giant wings and prepared to escape. I haven't received any orders from the Planet Master anyway, so it's better to save my life. But suddenly, as soon as it stood up, it was blocked by a huge figure behind it. The winged wolf was shocked. The person blocking it was none other than Hypageddon. His body was wrapped with the domineering energy that was about to break through. It frightened the winged wolf and kept retreating. At the same time, inside the central base, just as Bai Zi expected, the place was already in chaos. If the southeast base hadn't been suddenly attacked, Withering wouldn't have been able to find Bai Zi. At this moment, through the crows that arrived in time, it finally saw the current situation of the southeast base. The war was raging, the smoke was everywhere, and it looked like a ruined place. The withered and hollow pupils flashed red, and the voice was extremely low. A blind trick. It looked up into the distance, anger welling up. This is not good, we can't go on like this. Otherwise, it will affect our recovery. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix.